Good day, and now we will have our module number 2, which has the same competency with the module number 1 about differentiating bias from prejudice. So we will start on page number 1. So on page number 1, we can see here the objectives. So these are also related to the objectives that we had cited last time in our module number 1. So in what I know part, you will read the text below and answer the items that follow. Write your answers on a separate sheet of paper. So we have here the text entitled Trust by Raymond O. de la Cruz. So after reading those sentences, those paragraphs, it is followed by a letter. So it is from her mama, and the receiver will be Jennifer. So you will read that until here. So as we can see in the illustration that there is a lady, and after reading those sentences and paragraphs, we will identify what it is all about and the message behind this text. And after reading that, we will discover also and answer this item. So which of the following words is the opposite of trust? And then so on, you will just answer what is being asked in each item. And it's up to 15. So you will answer that after reading the text. So if you read that, it will be easy for you to answer. So for what's in, it's only 5-item activity. You will identify if it's positive or negative bias. So we had discussed last time in our previous module the differences between positive and negative bias. So you will draw a positive sign like an addition sign in mathematics and negative sign if it is negative. So write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. So positive, negative. So that's for what's in. So if you are still confused with that, you can go back to the video that we have in our previous module. So you can go back anytime if you have internet access. So for another 5-item, you will draw a heart shape if the statement is true and cross mark if the statement is false. So if it's opinion, it is probably under false, and if it's a pure fact, all information are factual and there is no added opinion, there is no added personal perception and perspective, then it will be under true. So heart and X. So it is based also for what you have learned from the first module. And going to the next part of this module, what's new? So study the short dialogue below, then accomplish the task that follows. So there is a conversation here which is entitled the club meeting. So the members are talking to one another about a particular topic, and the setting is they are in the school. Then the characters are all grade 9 students and the officers of the English club. So after reading that, you will analyze how they interact with one another, how they talk, how they consider, how they treat one another based on particular characteristic or traits that they have. So as you can see in the illustration, they are having a meeting. And after that, you will answer these 5 items. What is the topic of their discussion? Did they agree? Who among the members openly express? Who among them seems to have an objective, logical statement or opinion? If you were to emulate a student member in the group, who would that be and why? So you will answer that based on what you have understood and what you have learned from that dialogue. So that dialogue is based from a meeting, a faculty meeting. So what is it? So we will now expound our ideas about bias and prejudice. So when I say bias and prejudice are usually considered to be closely related and are generally interchangeable. In Module 1, you were introduced to this topic lengthily, where you distinguished between the two. Now you are expected to have gained appropriate skills on this subject and are ready to step on the next level. So we have here example, for example, a child who received violence and abuse from his father may regard all fathers as violent and abusive. So it is prejudice, because when I say prejudice, like what I have said in the previous discussion in the module number 1, that prejudice is for you are generalizing a group of people. For example, father, because of a single or only one father who treated you not so good, you will generalize that all fathers will be like that. For example, also, if you had a friend which betrayed you, then, or who betrayed you, then you will think that all of your friends will betray you. So that is prejudice, meaning without prior study or without analyzing, without trying first, before knowing them deeply, you will judge them right away. So that is prejudice. And also a term for prejudice is experience. Because of your previous experience, you tend to think that they will be the same as what you have experienced. Then when we say bias, it is you are having favoritism, or because it's also one of the examples that we have here is, for example, your idol is endorsing a particular product. So because of her or because of him, you will choose that product among any other products because it's your favorite celebrity, or simply it's your favorite, that you will neglect other choices. So that is bias. You have favoritism. Example here, he faces an adult male perceived as a father figure. He may either fear him or react defensively, and this bias creates unhealthy relationship with other people. So we have biases when we assume that something is one way based on our experience or beliefs. Sometimes this belief is also called prejudice when applied to other people. Bias can be affected by race, gender, experiences, religion, culture, education, or many other factors. So it is also affected by race. For example, you are Filipino. In a pageantry, if you will see a contestant which or who is Filipino, then you will be in favor with him or with her because you have the same race. For example, the same experience. If you also hear from a victim which who has the same experiences as yours, then you will be biased because you will relate yourself, because you can see yourself to the experience being felt by that victim. So when we say again bias, you are having your side you are having your side to a particular person, to a particular thing because it's your favorite, or maybe you can relate that you tend to neglect other sides or other choices. But when you say prejudice, because of your experience, you tend to judge other people. You tend to generalize all of them. So you experience it with one person, but you tend to generalize because you are now scared, you are now fear, you have trauma. So you will generalize it. So that is prejudice and the difference between the two. So in the dialogue you read about club meeting, two members are negatively biased about people living and coming from the provinces. In this case, the Ilonggos, the two members may have heard wrong information and bad impression about Ilonggos, a thought that directs them toward an action they developed this negative impression about them, which are clearly baseless and illogical. Based on the dialogue, these members regard themselves more superior than Jennifer, who is an Ilongga and who just transferred in her new school. Having this negative idea at the back of their mind, these members treated Jennifer harshly, and this how prejudice becomes bias. So they are interrelated, the bias and prejudice, because of the prejudice they had heard a particular news about Ilonggos, and Jennifer is Ilongga. Therefore, they will think that the news about the Ilonggos, the bad news about Ilonggos, will be the same characteristic trait with Jennifer. So that is prejudice, because they are generalizing all the Ilonggos and all the Ilonggas. And it becomes bias because the action made after those judgments became harshly to Jennifer. So that is bias because all students, all members should be treated properly. But Jennifer suffered from this judgment because of that race or for the province where she came from. I hope it made you clear. It made this explanation clear about biases and prejudice. So the prejudice, because we have the thinking that the skin tone or the color of our skin vary about being beautiful, about beauty of each of us. Because of the Spaniards who treated those Aita, Negrito, Dumagat with dark skin as baluga or somewhat ugly, which was having very shallow interpretation, analysis, judgment because of the tone, but it is not true to all. So we should not have prejudice, or we will not generalize that all of the people who will have dark skin will be ugly or will be baluga. So it's always depending on people, on how we see other people. So, but like what we have said, that one thing to avoid prejudice and bias is to respect. And also one way or one key to have respect from other people is to respect ourselves. So if we will respect ourselves, we will behave, we will be respectful, and we are open to accept other people the way even they are different from us, then still it's part of respect. No matter what skin do they have, no matter what race do they belong, no matter what religion they are believing in. So bias in action, like what I had said, if you do something based on the prejudice, for example, the skin color, then that will be the bias, because you tend to make an action response based on a shallow judgment, or sometimes it is just a discrimination, part of discrimination. But so we have the author's bias and prejudice. So we can also see the author's experience based on or about discrimination in terms of race, religion, skin. So like what is being tackled nowadays about the racial discrimination, or about the race, the black, about the white, so about Asian, some races are hating Asian or discriminating, underestimating. So that's part of bias and prejudice. So we can also see it in the reading materials, in the text that we can read, because literature is simply a mirror of what is happening in our world and outside the world, the fictitious or non-fictitious. But we should know how to respond well, to behave properly, and not so even though we experience some bias and prejudice to other people, let us learn, let us teach ourselves to do positive things despite that we receive negative things, because at the end of the day, it is not the way they treated us, but it is how we responded to those people who underestimated, who judged us so early, so fast. But it's the God who will really know what kind of life we have, and surely at the end of the day, because of our sufferings, because of the respect that we have to other people, even though sometimes we do not think that they deserve it, but God will give us reward, and that is eternal, and not only material or earthly things here. So a written work may be biased when it's heavily opinionated or one-sided. So if it is not open for other side, for example, about politics, about a particular topic, for example, a product, so it is biased. Because if it is not biased, it will be open for all. It tries to sell you something in disguise, or it has hidden agenda. It uses extreme or inappropriate language, or sometimes we can hear that they are exaggerating, they have over or OA, that it is part of figures of speech that for us to believe, for us to buy something, they will exaggerate things. It relies on unsupported or unsubstantiated claims. Excuse me. So, if we can see that those resources those sources where the information came from are not really valid, not really credible, or not really strong, so we can also see that it's bias. So it pretends to present facts but offers only opinion. So it's sometimes confusing that if we can see facts, sometimes we are thinking that it's all factual, but sometimes they will just put some factual information for us to believe, but they have opinion inside the text. So we should be a critical reader upon reading their text. So it is entertainment based of a form, or in a form of parody or satire. It presents highly selected facts that lean to a certain outcome. Its author is unidentifiable, lacks expertise, or writes on unrelated topics. It tries to persuade you to think a certain way with no regard for factual evidence. So sometimes, if author is anonymous, we can know what's the real name, who is that person. Therefore, there is a lack of confidence, maybe or most probably because he is afraid to be caught because of being biased or being judgmental in a way. So those can be a written work which are biased. So why is it important for us to identify bias and prejudice? So as a student, you do a lot of researching. Thus, it is important for you to understand bias because it helps you see the purpose of a text. Whether it is a piece of writing, a painting, a photograph, or anything, you need to be able to identify bias in every source you use. So having a biased idea does not make you a bad person, and not every bias is negative or hurtful. It is not recognizing biases that can lead to bad decisions at work, in life, and in relationships. So we should avoid biases because it is not being open, sometimes we tend to not see other perspectives, and seeing other perspectives, we tend to inquisitive, we tend to become critical, because we are not only dealing with one, but we are dealing with many choices, and we can consider all of those, because if we have many choices, then we can think which is better or which is best. So, student or not, young or old, and regardless of your situation in life, identifying biases and prejudices proves to be very important. Logical and effective judgment is achieved if one knows this skill. Don't forget what you've learned from module number 1. Not all biases and prejudice are negative. Remember that. One may not like to sit beside a smoker because he knew how body smoking can damage one's health. Furthermore, his loved one might have passed away due to lung cancer as a result of smoking. So this is a positive biased idea. One must hate smoking but not the smoker. So how it becomes positive, because you are not hurting others' feeling, but you are hurt with a certain action but not the doer. Like the smoking, it is the action itself which was the reason why his loved one passed away, but not that specific smoker who killed his loved one. So I hope it is clear. So this ends our discussion on differentiating between the two. I hope you learned a lot from the discussion, and now we will proceed to the independent activity number 1. So you have learned that biases and prejudice may be evident in photographs, paintings, and other medium. In this activity, you will study the illustrations carefully, then identify the bias and prejudice or issue they try to convey. So you will just choose among these choices. You will only write the letter of your answer on a separate sheet of paper. So it's A, racial discrimination, B, gender insensitivity, C, social discrimination, D, employment preferences, E, inequality in education, F, war and violence. So we can see here, we have here 5 illustrations. Then you will just choose among those 6 options based on what you can infer, based on what you can see, observe in each illustration. So you will observe it properly. So we can also use the context clues, like you are hired. Where do we use that among these choices? We can see the buildings, what kind of buildings, about this, how many boys, how many girls. Then like this one, what is the difference? Also this one. So you can also identify the words here. So that's all for activity number 1. For assessment number 1, you have to read the letter below. So dear Jen, from her mama. So then fill in the boxes with appropriate sentences from the text that correspond to the details asked for. Write your answers on a separate sheet, and number 1 is done for you. So we have here number 1. So personal experiences that resulted to subjective view toward things and people. So when you say subjective, it's your own point of view. So bias and prejudice, I find it hard to trust people easily. So based here of what you have read and your own personal experiences about why do you think it is hard to trust people easily. So you can include personal experiences here. So we have 4. We are asking for experiences which are personal that made you have difficulty to trust people easily. So that is for independent assessment number 1. For independent activity number 2, you will read the text below using the checklist provided. Assess if the author is biased in presenting his article. Put a check mark if it is observed and a cross mark if it is not. So we have, you have to read this one. So note, we have a note here. In Independent Activity 2 and Independent Assessment 2, you will evaluate two different texts in using the same rating scale provided for you. Using one rating scale is important because you are expected to discover differences between texts. So make sure to read each text carefully. So this is the first text from CNN's Barry's Neil, retrieved last January 23 to 2021. So we have here, so the sign. After reading that, you will check, is it a check or a cross? So you will just write 1 to 9 on your paper, then draw a check mark if it is observing a bias, or if the author is biased, then cross if it's not. So independent assessment number 2, you will read this, then the same thing. Then activity number 3, read and understand the statements, then determine if they express prejudice, put a check mark if prejudice, a cross mark if not. So like this, you will, but now in independent activity number 3, it's focusing on prejudice. So check if it observed prejudice, then cross if it's not. Then for activity or assessment number 3, put it in a paragraph. Read each paragraph below, then tell if it is a positive prejudice or a negative prejudice and be able to explain why. So A, positive prejudice, B, negative prejudice. So if also one key to identify if it's positive or negative is the outcome. If it will hurt people, or it is intended to the doer itself, it's negative. Then if it is only for the sake of other people, so it's prejudice or positive prejudice. Okay, we have 5 items here. So what will you do? You will identify if it is prejudice or positive or negative prejudice, then tell reason why did you say that or why you have answered like that. Then for what I have learned, you will complete. I realize that prejudice and bias are different in terms of blah blah blah. So it is depending on what you have learned. So what I can do, you will read the text and accomplish the evaluation checklist. This one. So signs of biased writing or source, check or cross. Check if it's biased, then X if it's not. Then write the sentence or expression here. If there is none, simply write an A. So if you answer check, then you will write the sentence which is describing each item. For example, heavily opinionated or one-sided. You will, if you answered at the check mark or if you draw a check mark, then you should find a sentence which will support that your answer or that it is heavily opinionated. So you can locate those sentences with the text that you have read. So for assessment, you will read this one, and then after reading, you will answer this. So in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, 6, 7, so you will copy the bias or prejudice statement. So in paragraph 1, which sentence expresses biased idea? Write the sentence on your answer sheet. So you will, in each paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, there is a bias or prejudice in the writing. So you will just locate it, what sentence is bias or is a sign of bias and prejudice. So for comprehension check, you will just give what is being asked or what is being described in each item. So letter C, it's 5 items. Write letter B if it is biased, then B if it's prejudice. And we discussed it a while ago and also in the previous module. So for your additional activity, this will be the last. Create a written dialogue that shows the importance of differentiating bias and prejudice. What is dialogue? It is a conversation. For example, you are talking to your classmate, to your friend, to your sibling, to your family member, or to whoever you want to talk to. Then you will have dialogues or conversation about differentiating bias, or what is the importance of differentiating bias, or what is the importance of knowing or identifying bias and prejudice in a text for us to avoid fake news, or for us not to judge, for not us to hurt other people, so like that. And I hope that this module will be helpful for all of us, because we know that if we feel hurt, if we know the feeling of hurt, then it should be the indication for us not to hurt other people by discriminating them, by judging them right away. Because all of us are having different stories to be told, and we never know what suffering do our neighbors have. So we should not be the one who will make them feel degraded and feel them down. So we should lift ourselves, other people, because at the end of the day, it is not only ourselves who will be happy by helping them, but we will be more meaningful, we will have a more meaningful life if we serve other people, if we not judge them. Because by accepting other people, regardless of what they have, regardless of who they are, we will feel that the world is full of love and not for hate. God bless and thank you. And if you have still questions about prejudice and bias, you are free to chat or message your English teacher. So have a great day. Have a positive day without prejudice and without bias, without hating other people. Thank you and God bless.